Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we talk about 10 more horror movies that I highly recommend. So our world is pretty crazy right now, which really makes a lot of us feel overwhelmed and alone, which makes caring for our mental, emotional, and physical needs a huge priority. So when Tantallee recently reached out to me about their adult products, I was very impressed. They offer a wide range of quality products designed to meet your needs, with life-size doll torsos made of food-grade TPE materials. They have super soft, realistic skin textures that will bring you a better immersive experience than other adult products can. They ship free worldwide and use discreet packaging so you don't have to worry about your privacy. And right now I have a special offer for you guys. When you type the code GHOST12 at checkout, you'll save 12% on all their products. So go to the link in the top pinned comment or in the video description to learn more about Tantallee today. And with that, let's get to the list!
Don't you remember anything? How it was?
Inland Empire is a 2006 experimental psychological thriller. Written, directed, and produced by David Lynch. It stars Laura Dern, Justin Theroux, and Jeremy Irons. As an actress begins to adapt the persona of her character in a film, her world becomes nightmarish and surreal.
This sounds like dialogue from her script.
Cut it.
So ever since the passing of David Lynch, I've just been rewatching a lot of his films and series and things like that. I can't help it. But also little art house theater that's not too far from me has been playing a lot of his movies. Like a couple days from now, I plan to go see Blue Velvet there. The other day I saw Mulholland Drive. It's just really cool to see these on the big screen with a packed audience and just realize what an effect he had and how much he still is appreciated by a lot of people. It's a special feeling. But I hadn't seen this since probably right around the time that it came out. So I pretty much didn't remember it at all. And it's really exciting to rewatch a movie that you've seen, but that you've forgotten. So you get to kind of re-enjoy it all over again. And that doesn't happen very often, but when it's a movie like this, that's so weird, so artsy, so creative, but confusing, hard to follow, hard to figure out, but exciting at the same time because of how much mystery and intrigue is there. But of all of David Lynch's movies, this might have the most creepy, surreal, and downright scary elements and moments of any of his films. And Laura Dern is incredible in this. Her acting, the way she carries this role, because it's a complex character like all of David Lynch's characters, where you never quite know what the actual character is because they all kind of have almost split personalities, and as things change around them, you start to see them in a different light. But it's also beautifully shot, very artistic, very creative, everything that you would expect from a David Lynch. But it is a long, slow burn kind of film that is definitely not going to be for everyone. But if you enjoy David Lynch for the most part, and you haven't seen this, or if you're like me and it's been a long time, I highly, highly recommend this one.
It is spreading like a disease. Any of us could be next.
Monolith is a 2022 Australian sci-fi thriller directed by Matt Vesely from a script written by Lucy Campbell and stars Lily Sullivan, a headstrong journalist whose podcast uncovers a strange artifact, an alien conspiracy, and the lies at the heart of her own story.
I need your help, listeners. An anonymous email, an object filled with unknowable power. Is there anyone out there that knows anything about these bricks?
This is a very, very small movie that really has just Lily Sullivan in it. But she carries it so well. And if you're someone like me that enjoys slow burn, artsy, experimental kind of movies and little tiny budget indie movies where they're working with basically nothing but a creative idea, then I think this is one you'll really enjoy because it's so mysterious and it's a really fun journey to little by little put together the pieces and figure out what the bigger picture here is. Because even though this movie is all really in one location with one actress, it's a much bigger story than that, because what you hear, the dialogue, the ideas that are presented, and as the story unfolds, you see that the universe, so to speak, is a much bigger world, even if all you're seeing is just this one location, which really reminded me of the movie Pontypool, just how it has that kind of feel to it, where it's very small on what you're seeing, but a much bigger, more interesting story around it. And once again, I am so impressed with Australian film. Their indie movies, especially, that have been coming out of Australia for the last few years have just been awesome. But once again, this is a very small production, tiny little indie, artsy kind of movie, and that's just not for everyone. So if that's not your jam, then you might want to skip this one. But if you're into indie sci-fi horror movies that'll stick with you after you've seen them, this is one you absolutely should check out. Mandrake is a 2022 Irish folk horror movie. Directed by Lynn Davison, it stars Deirdre Mullins, Dermot Crotty, and Paul Kennedy. The story is about a probation officer who is tasked with rehabilitating a notorious killer named Bloody Mary Laidlaw back into society following a 2-decade sentence.
Why do you stay in this town?
This is a cool little movie that you really never hear anybody talk about. It's creepy and witchy and full of vibes, and I just love that kind of folk horror movie. And Ireland generally puts out some of the very best, but this is one you just don't hear people talk about when you hear about folk horror. And granted, it is a small movie, went straight to Shudder a couple years ago, one of those kind of movies, but I think there's still a lot here to enjoy, especially if you're someone that really enjoys mood and vibe and look and style of a movie, because that's what, to me, makes this movie worth seeing. It just feels cold and creepy and eerie the entire runtime. It also has some pretty interesting twists and takes these different directions that I didn't see coming. So if you're into witchy, moody, atmospheric folk horror movies, this is one you definitely should add to your list.
I'm not running.
Dark Match is a 2024 Canadian slasher horror movie. Written and directed by Lowell Dean, it stars Aisha Issa, Stephen Ogg, and Chris Jericho. A small-time wrestling company accepts a well-paying gig in a backwoods town, only to learn that the community is run by a mysterious cult leader with devious plans for their match.
Let the celebration begin!
Only one walks away.
I think this is such a fun movie, but especially if you're a fan of the WWE or wrestling in general, because one, it has Chris Jericho, who plays a great villain. But beyond that, there's actual wrestling in it. It just has a real fun wrestling kind of vibe to it. But beyond that, it's still a fun horror movie, so you don't even have to be into wrestling, I think, to enjoy this. Because it gets gory, there's a bit of camp to it. It's not something that you take overly serious at all. The whole movie is a little bit tongue-in-cheek and leans into what it is. But there's also some really entertaining characters in this that are really fun to watch. But at its core, it's just a campy, bloody good time, but one that I think you'll definitely enjoy.
Let's have some fun.
Cam is a 2018 psychological horror movie. Directed by Daniel Goldhaber, it stars Madeline Brewer, Melora Walters, and Patch Dara. When her account is stolen by a lookalike, a cam girl sets out to unmask the mysterious woman and get her identity back.
Is this what you want?
This is one of my favorite hidden gem movies, especially over on Netflix. I've heard a few people talk about it over the years. I've mentioned it a couple times, but it still really flies under the radar. And I think it's so interesting, especially it's a movie that as time goes by, it becomes more and more relevant, and the topics and things that it deals with and talks about just seem to be more and more real and something that we're dealing with all the time right now. Because not only does this take the adult industry on and a lot of the stereotypes and things like that, and shows kind of behind the scenes with a cam girl life, which I think is really well done and realistic, but it also deals with AI and deep fakes and leans into that kind of horror and what it just feels like to lose all sense of self, your whole identity. I think it does as good of a job as anything I've ever seen at talking about that and dealing with that subject. And even though it is a movie about the sex industry, it doesn't overdo that element. This doesn't feel like a softcore porn by any means. I mean, yeah, you'll see a little bit of nudity here and there, but the story is what the focus is. This is not that kind of movie. It's not a titillating kind of movie that's just bringing you in for boobs. But it's also gritty and dirty and uncomfortable at times. It feels very authentic and very real. Also super twisted and creepy, especially as it gets to the end. So if this is one for whatever reason you've never seen, I think you need to do yourself a favor and make this the next thing that you watch. Bones and All is a 2022 cannibal horror movie. Directed by Luca Guadagnino, it stars Taylor Russell, Timothy Chalamet, and Mark Rylance. The plot's about a pair of young cannibals who flee together on a road trip across the country and develop feelings for each other.
I came looking for you. I smelled you.
You can smell me half a mile away. Can you do that?
Not that far.
This is absolutely one of my favorite movies from 2022, and another movie that has very much flown under the radar, which is just shocking to me because, one, Luca Guadagnino has started to really make a name for himself as a filmmaker, but more than that, Timothy Chalamet is like the it guy right now. He's in so many different movies, especially since his rise to fame with Dune. And this might be his best role. I mean, it's right up there with his movie he did recently about Bob Dylan called The Complete Unknown, which is a fantastic movie, but honestly, I think he did a better job in this, or at least as good. There's so many layers to all the characters in this movie, and nothing is what it seems exactly, because even the best people in this movie are still cannibals. So, I mean, how good of a person can you actually be? But there are layers to what that means. There's layers to how demented and disturbing and creepy you can be, as well as being a cannibal. And I love that. On top of that, there's a really interesting and compassionate love story here that takes some real weird twists and turns. There's a lot of underlying messages, a lot of things you could take away from this, but even if you just watch it as a movie and don't try to dig too deep and figure out what the real core meaning to it is or anything like that, you're still gonna enjoy yourself. I mean, yeah, it is a love story, but it's a love story like Natural Born Killers, where it's really creepy, really disturbing, very uncomfortable. And this movie gets gory at times, much more than Natural Born Killers. There's a lot more horror here, especially when it comes to ideas, but they do show you stuff as well. But beyond that, it's artistically powerful in the way that it's shot, the way that it's edited, the sound design, everything is put together in a way that makes you feel a lot throughout this movie. But I think this is an absolute treasure that way too many people have not seen. So if you're one of those, you need to definitely check this one out.
But I cannot see it, even as I look right at it.
I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House is a 2016 gothic supernatural horror movie. Written and directed by Osgood Perkins, it stars Ruth Wilson, Bob Balaban, and Paula Prentice. It's about a woman who works as a live-in nurse and suspects that her elderly employer's house may be haunted.
Me that can see only the drawer that opens. Hello? And the spots that spread.
I am such a big fan of Osgood Perkins. I've enjoyed every movie that he's done, and a lot of people are not in that camp. I mean, I know a lot of people thought Longlegs was overhyped and didn't enjoy that. A lot of people didn't like this movie. This is very much, a movie that's for certain people. In a lot of ways, this movie reminds me of a movie that came out earlier this year called Presence. It just has that real slow, kind of quiet, creepy feel to it, where the atmosphere and the dread and things like that are what make it horror, and it just slowly pulls you in. I do think this movie is more horrific, more scary, and designed that way than Presence. Presence felt much more like a drama, whereas this to me is very much a horror movie. It's just an artsy, slow burn kind of horror movie that's just not for everyone. I mean, I know a lot of people shit on this movie and call it boring. I get it, because you have to be in the right headspace. You got to be someone that enjoys that slow dread that just slowly builds and pulls you down into this pit of despair and anxiety and all those things. And I think this movie is just so beautifully done for that type of film. You know, this may not be your thing, and that's what I'm kind of trying to stress to you. So don't go writing in the comments like, that movie is boring, blah, blah. It's like, I warned you. Like, I try in these videos to tell you guys what a movie's like. And so that hopefully you know what your taste is. You know the types of film that you enjoy, that you can really resonate with. And so you'll pick those and not other ones. Like, just because I recommend it doesn't mean it's for you. It could be for someone else's, you know, sensibilities and taste in horror. But this is a gorgeous movie that's extremely well shot, well done. The atmosphere is just palpable and it just thick throughout. So if that sounds like something that you would be into, I think you absolutely should give this a look. Malum is a 2023 horror movie directed by Anthony DiBlasi and a reboot of his 2014 film Last Shift, and stars Jessica Sula, Eric Olsen, and Chaney Morrow. A rookie police officer willingly takes the last shift at a newly decommissioned police station in an attempt to uncover the mysterious connection between her father's death and a vicious cult.
Blandford Police Department.
You don't know what happened, but your father was no saint.
Your daddy started something very important. Tonight we're gonna finish it.
So this is another one that's been very polarizing. I've heard a lot of people, and I understand the sentiment behind it. It's like, why would you remake your own movie that was already a really good movie just because you get a bigger budget? Like, what's the point in that? And I do get that. But I also can really appreciate what he did because he still really cared about this idea and felt like he was never able to really see that idea through in the way that he envisioned because of the resources that he had at the time. And so when given an opportunity almost 10 years later, he went for it and remade his movie. And it's not exactly the same. There are a few changes here and there, but I really like both of them. They feel very different to me though, because the original Last Shift, I really enjoy the grittiness. I really enjoy that it's on the super low budget and you can feel that, but it gives it this realism, this real disturbing quality. But this, on the other hand, the budget shows because the special effects, the costume designs, the directions and visuals that this takes it are really, really cool. I mean, there are some of the more unique, imaginative, creepy, just terrifying costume designs in this movie that I've seen in quite a while. And I think even if you've seen Last Shift, this is worth seeing because even though the story is roughly the same, this kind of dives deeper into the backstory and flushes out the characters even more. But beyond that, it's the gore, it's the special effects, it's that terrifying, creepy horror element to this that I think make it definitely worth checking out. And now that it's not a rental anymore, that it's available on Shudder or AMC, I think it's a great time to give this one a look because even if you're not crazy about it, give it a shot because I think it just might surprise you. Rupture is a 2016 sci-fi horror movie. Directed by Steven Shainberg, it stars Noomi Rapace, Peter Stormare, and Michael Chiklis. Abducted and studied by a group of strangers, a single mother's genetic abnormality causes her to transform into her true self.
All that human emotional nonsense can be obliterated forever.
This is such an interesting little movie, and I know it's very small. This is the epitome of an indie movie where you can feel that there's talent on display, there's great acting, they do a lot with what they have, but you can still tell that it's a very, very small production. But it's got some really cool ideas. The directions that it takes are really cool. And I really enjoy Noomi Rapace. She's just fantastic in everything she's in. And I wish we saw her get more leading roles. And so to see her in this as the main character, it's great to see what she can do. And there's a lot of body horror elements and things like that that she has to perform where she's not even able to talk and just still convey these ideas and concepts of what she's going through. On top of that, I'm always a fan of Peter Stormare. He is just such a great villain. And I think once again, he does a great job in this. But you got to keep in mind, like I said, it's a very small movie. There's not crazy huge special effects. It's a real compact kind of story that takes place in just a couple locations. But I do think they do a lot with what they're working with, and there's some really cool, creative, and disturbing, interesting ideas that are presented here. So I think if you just go into this looking to be entertained, not expecting too much, I think you'll have a great time with it.
Who knows? Maybe we'll end up being best friends.
Come here! Come to Daddy!
Come to Daddy is a 2019 black comedy thriller. Directed by Ant Timpson, it stars Elijah Wood, Stephen McHattie, and Ona Greer. A man in his 30s travels to a remote cabin to reconnect with his estranged father. So I always like to end these lists with something fun, something you don't have to overthink or take overly serious, but just one you can relax to with some popcorn. And I think this is a fantastic pick. It's exciting, it's funny, it's gross at times, it has a little bit of horror, but mostly thriller vibes. It's all over the place. It gets confusing, but then at the end, it'll reel you back in. Trust me, you'll get what's going on here. But there are definitely times in this where you'll be super confused. But Elijah Wood is just amazing in this. I am such a big fan of what he's done with his career. He always picks these quirky, strange roles and just knocks them out of the park. But it's also great to see Stephen McHattie because you just don't see him in enough movies. I mean, besides Pontypool, he just hasn't been in a lot of movies that have gotten much run at all. I mean, even Pontypool is a very underground little scene movie. But he's just a blast. He plays just such unique, interesting characters, layered characters, and just does a great job with them. And once again, he's incredible in this. But it's zany, it's kooky, it's weird and bizarre, and just an absolute blast. I think it's a perfect pick for this Saturday night. So do yourself a favor this weekend, pick one of the movies off of this list, grab your popcorn and your candy, and enjoy! And I want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so much to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or you can become a channel member by clicking on that join button down there and help support the channel that way. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about 10 more horror movies that I highly recommend. And I'll see you guys next time.